and if you guys want to, ask questions as well, you can do that too. Actually, if you write the questions in caps, that'll be cool, because then I'll kind of know and be able to differentiate, the comments from the actual questions. That'll be cool.
We got audio. Looks like we might have a little bit of lag. We're using a new camera, guys. Woohoo! That's good news.
Yeah.
So working through the technical difficulties, we've got a little bit of fuzziness, but it's a much higher quality picture, professional.
Oh, you're actually
quality.
drinking out of that, right?
Yeah, I'm actually drinking that.
Okay,
Here.
so not a good idea.
Use the decanter.
Okay, cool.
All right, so we're live. Surprise hangout. Got Mike here. Beautiful Scars 2.0.
Yeah.
We'll just do the quick, brief introductory since we did this fairly recently, but
Yeah.
I'll let you jump in and say a few things, and then we'll go from there and get the ball rolling.
Sounds good. So I'm Beautiful Scars. I had an Instagram. Well, I'm Beautiful Scars 2.0 actually. I had an Instagram called Beautiful Scars, reached 10,000 followers, and they took me off. They took me right off. And so like right now with Beautiful Scars 2.0, I have like 2,400. So it's getting back up there.
Good.
Which is it's not the goal to reach
maybe
10,000, but
400. So you're winning by a whole 2K there.
yeah. No, it's all good though. And like that's pretty much it. I'm real. I speak my mind. I'm not politically correct. And I like to kind of call myself the uncliche gay because I support Trump and I support America and I support all of the those are values that I grew up with, and they seem to be lost nowadays. It's like, where did all these communists come from? All of a sudden, like overnight, one day, just a bunch of communists. It's like, I was brought up to just... I was brought up, like, right before they stopped teaching that, communists are bad people. and that system is very bad.
Socialism bad, okay? Yeah.
So, it's a weird world that we live in. But anyway, that's me. I speak my mind. And I'm surprised I have any friends, because... No, but I have some amazing friends that are real too, so... Yeah. Anyway, that's me.
I understand. I actually most recently had a run-in with an individual. I was drinking wine with a young lady, and we were having a nice conversation. She decided to ask who I voted for, and I gave the honest answer.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to escalate. I said, we disagree, that's fine. And it turned into something ugly, not by anything of my, I was, we disagree, we can drop the topic, we can talk about it. We're going to disagree, that's not a problem. Disagreements are good.
Yeah.
Conversations are good. That's the whole point of what we're doing here, is to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm trying to see if I can get somebody to come and sit in the chair who is of a different persuasion, who leans, again, I really, in my own life, don't see things in terms of left and right, but for the sake of simplicity, more left-leaning individuals sit down and have a conversation about what they think, and really try to unpack some issues and maybe have a little, friendly banter and debate, but we'll see,
Yeah.
Seems like they're a little more timid, which is odd, but I understand. It's you have these strange run-ins. I mean, I've got as many.
When was this one with the lady?
This was just this last week.
Wow.
Somebody texted me and asked if I was just somebody who comes in. I bartend to pay the rent. Came in, asked if I was working. I had just gotten off. I said, "Why don't you come by though, and we can have a glass of wine and chat." We did, and everything was going quite nice until it went to that.
Oh God.
And then it was just the same old epithets and slurs and ad hominem things. That's just quite not exactly makes for intelligent banter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but on the same hand, I've got just as many good friends who are of I guess what you would say, more left-leaning persuasion. Some who are straight up friendly with sort of some of Karl Marx's writing, which is a little disquieting, but we have a nice, intelligent conversation all the same, and we part friends, and I think that's good.
So you actually have some friends who like Karl Marx's philosophy.
I do. Yeah. Well, and you got to give Marx some credit where credit's due as far as his critique of capitalism goes. That was fairly accurate. It's just his solution that was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible in all ways, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Win some, you lose some.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, if you guys want to go on YouTube, the name of the video is Surprise Hangout with Mike of Beautiful Scars 2.0 exclamation mark. Type that in, type in the name Joshua Lazarus, and you should be able to find the live video.
Yeah, come by, hang out, check it out, hop in the chat.
You can hop in the chat.
Yeah, it would be a lot more interaction, and that's kind of what we're doing. We want to have some interaction with people out there in the world, and get some questions and try and get this conversation ball rolling. Yeah. So yeah, hop in the chat, throw some questions, throw some ideas out there, and if there's something good in there, we'll unpack it and throw it into this open format here. But with that said, as I crack my horribly screwed up shoulder, let's get rolling.
Yeah.
We want to start in with
Rosie.
Start in with Rosie and the emergence of that in the cultural zeitgeist again. Let's go there.
Let's go there. Well, she came back on the air after 21 years? I think it was 21 years, and initially it was 18 million viewers, which is great, but after days of counting it all out, she did 29 million viewers. That's amazing.
That's great.
That's really great. People love her, and she has fans that are left leaning and right leaning, and but they still love her anyway. They may not agree with her, and it's cool that she's kind of being a bit of a bridge right now.
Yeah, well, I think that's huge. That's important. I think that's the first manifestation of greater change culturally.
Yeah.
That is hopefully indicative of sort of healing the fracturing that's gone on between the political divide and the emergence of maybe a sort of new system of thought. That's much less red or blue, much more what you would call like purple, sort of concept, much more of a blending of the two, and I think we're starting to see that emerge in the culture slowly.
Yeah. And and I always say, you always hear me say it, how I have hope for the future. It's just that we don't tend to be able to foresee it. You know what I mean? We have the hope, but it's like, if we were going to lay out a blueprint or something, it's like we can't, because we have no idea how it's going to happen. So it looks like this is one way for that to happen. Like, this is the beginning steps, where we can hopefully not be as divided as we are. Hopefully be a lot more united in the future. Mm-hmm. We'll still be individuals,
Sure.
but not so divided, and not just divided, but the hate.
It's not so much the division, because there's a necessity for more liberal and more conservative ideology. I don't like the term ideology, but for lack of a better term, ideology or conceptualization, perspectives on the world. There's a necessity for both, obviously.
Agreed. Yeah.
But I fail to see the necessity of the level of vitriol and what would you say? Self-righteousness on either side, moral casting down of the people opposite you. I saw that just in that evening in conversation with the young lady I was with and other people who she decided to rope into the conversation. A particular individual I spoke to said something along the lines of, well, I was speaking to them about, well, so you have your own political opinions, or you came to your own conclusions in the last election. I came to my own conclusions, and they didn't happen to coincide. But as we can see in this conversation and what we laid out, we actually have similar values. You know, we just have a different perspective on things. So we're not really all that different, and so I don't think that you really are probably all that different from all the other people who voted for Donald Trump, for example. And there's an older woman, and she said something along the lines of, well, no, it has to do with good and evil.
Oh.
And that for me was just really, really disheartening and really disturbing when you get down to the sort of philosophical presupposition that would lead you to that conclusion. Because, I mean, you're essentially casting an entire half of a nation as somehow
evil,
morally bankrupt or corrupt,
yeah,
for having a different opinion than you, and that's scary. That's a scary line of thought.
Yeah.
To me, you know, I mean, and even to consider oneself the arbiter of objective morality, it's like dangerous waters, my friend. So, I think that's really a bigger issue, because if you're Jordan Peterson said something along the lines of, if you're talking to somebody with whom you disagree and they're obviously not stupid, then maybe you should listen, because they probably have a different, they know something you don't, and vice versa, you know. But they're probably not evil. I mean, maybe, but
can't believe that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was really, and then in the same breath to have that individual grandstanding about compassion towards, say, illegal migrants, you know, that, well, you can be so you're so compassionate towards people who have come into a nation illegally, and there's nothing wrong with being compassionate towards those people, but then you can't exercise compassion towards, you know, the other half of your own nation, of people who are here legally and share, at least to some degree, the same value structure as you. It's the inconsistency there, and the ability to, again, lift oneself up as somehow virtuous and compassionate, that I find really, I can't square that circle in my mind, you know, and how one cannot see their own hypocrisy in that is just, it's sad and it's disturbing.
Yeah.
You know?
They really don't see it. They don't see what is, they don't perceive their own hypocrisy, which they're definitely hypocrites. You know, I don't mean that in sort of attacking, you know, kind of.
Yeah, it's not to degrade anybody.
Yeah. But they don't see it, and it can be really hard to have a conversation. I try not to have them. But then, you know, thankfully I have a lot of great friends that I can have those conversations with. Actually, just last night, because I had gone out, and we went out for drinks and we went out for dinner, and there was some new people there that I had never met. And I was having good conversation with one of them, and we were eating and drinking, and he had just mentioned, honestly, I've forgotten what we were actually talking about, but he used, he said these words. He said, oh, because, our terrible president, and at least he said our president.
Yeah, right.
But he said, because our terrible president, something, something, something. And I've forgotten what the conversation was really about. And I find a way to dance, beyond that, and or try to turn it into a positive in some way. Because I said something along the lines, I wish I could remember everything that was said, but I had a heavy drinking night. I'm just going to tell everybody right now. And it was great.
Wouldn't
it was
know anything
fun.
about that.
But I said, well, I think it's because of him that we're actually allowed to something or other now. And I don't remember, but I always, I tend to have, like a right back at you kind of thing with people, or I just don't say anything. But usually I have some sort of direct reply, because what they're saying, they're not even sure of what they're saying. Like, they don't even know really what they're saying. So it's kind of very easy to reply because all of a sudden, you know, a couple of facts enter my head. You just jolted a couple of facts in my head, and
think
I just
to yourself, well, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
That's not accurate.
Yeah. And if you want to debate that, well,
right,
we can debate that.
We can do that, but yeah, we're going to have to try and maintain some sense of civility, and it seems that people don't.
Well, this person did.
That's good.
You know, thankfully, they didn't turn it into a big deal. I think. I mean, this is just my perception. I could just be totally wrong and making this up in my head, and it's just my perception. It's not that it's absolute fact, but I think that I carry myself pretty well so that when I'm in an environment, I don't really get attacked because I think that they think about me probably, well, you know, he's a decent guy. I don't agree with his political view, but he's not shoving it down my throat. So he's a decent guy, and he's not making a big deal of it. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. And I think that's kind of what ends up happening because it can come up in conversation, that the fact that I'm a Trump supporter, and it never ends up really turning into a big deal. Thank goodness, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I think that the best presupposition to go in with is that we may come to different conclusions, but I'm going to basically treat you upon the basis that you treat me. At the end of the day, if you're
that's right,
and the way you treat other people and your general character, you know, that's what I'm going to judge you upon. That's how I'm going to decide to treat you. Now, if you are going to, because of coming to different political opinions or whatever opinions, different opinions about The Last Jedi, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or Roseanne. Fine. Is this going to be a point of contention for us? Are we going to turn this into something ugly? Are we going to carry some sort of resentment over it? Or are we going to treat each other as individuals and respect each other's different worldviews?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the presupposition upon which all of Western democracy is built. Is that we can come and we can debate these ideas and still share the same body of law, the same ethics, the same general morality, you know, and we assume that as much.
Yeah.
And as long as we can do that and treat each other with some compassion and some kindness as individuals and on a one-to-one basis, then there just doesn't seem to me to be a need to act ultimately childish over politics, you know, and what do you say?
Well, conservatives have treated me way nicer than liberals, to be honest with you.
In context to politics or just in general?
Just in general. In my life, in my memory, and just especially recently, you know, and for example, like, if I go to a gay bar, there's just like so much not niceness, you know. They're very judgy, you know, and you know, sometimes for them it's about who looks the best at the bar or something like that, and they're just very sort of like, they don't want to connect, they don't want to have a deep conversation. And when I get together with my friends, that's all I love to do. I love to have like a great glass of wine and then have like really deep philosophical conversations.
Right.
Maybe something's going on in life, or you're dating someone, you talk about it, and those are the kind of things that I like to talk about. I like to talk about life, and so liberals tend to be more superficial, also in very survival mode. That's the kind of vibe that they tend to.
You know, that's an interesting observation. I have been wondering. I do a lot of thinking and writing on, you know, my own form of writing on, ethics, and sort of that from which an individual derives their own ethics in life, or how they implement them, and it seems that this tendency seems reflected when it comes to terms like when it comes to something like religion, for example, you would most likely have more atheistic people in the left camp, and much more likely to be religious or Christian people on the right.
Yeah.
And do you think that maybe that's part and parcel because the atheistic ethic is a secular worldview that sort of by nature has to be materialistic? Or
that's a good question.
What would you say, the American Pragmatic School, the empirical worldview as opposed to the more skeptical one. Do you think that might be why you see a lot of the shallow you feel like in your experience, you experience more of a petty, shallow sort of superficiality?
Yep. I think that you got something there, because I think that that's true, and, I'm on, the OkCupid dating site, and they have similar to Tinder, swipe left, swipe right, whatever, whatever that
dating in the 21st century.
Yeah. And so usually at the top it'll say like atheist, and if they're atheist, like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I have to swipe left. I just can't do it.
That's funny.
Now, if I meet someone face to face and they happen to be an atheist and we're getting along really great, that's fine.
Right.
But that's definitely not what I'm looking for, because atheists, it's very much what you said. They do kind of go together, unfortunately. The more worldliness, the more materialistic, colder, and I'm not religious, and I don't subscribe to any religion, but I'm deeply spiritual, actually. Mm-hmm. So, there, I'm not gonna have this fight with you about like how nothing's out there. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, my favorite little joke a lot of times in a conversation, when the conversation moves to that, and it's more of a prod, is to say something along the lines of, well, I don't believe in God. I'm like, well, I don't believe in atheists. But it's true. I have friends who I've kind of convinced them to kind of change or question their worldview.
Yeah.
When I said there's no such thing as an atheist, and I mean, that's obviously kind of a Yiannopoulos-ian sort of over the top joke, but identify what is whatever you want to identify it with, including an attack helicopter. But because it's like the conversation I told you I was having the other night, when the woman brought up good and evil, and I said, well, are you religious? She said, no. And I'm like, but you believe in objective morality. You believe there's an objective good and objective evil. By virtue of what? Without being... I mean, that's a religious presupposition in and of itself, because that's the concept of a transcendent objective morality that's given then by whom? Because if everything is merely material and subjective, and what would you say? I mean, it's sort of like an offshoot of Kantian ethics, everything is based upon subjective interpretation, which is accurate, but then you can't make a case for objective morality, because then your morality, as you see it, you assume to be a subjective. You have to, through your own admission. It just doesn't hold up philosophically.
Right.
Right,
it's true.
And even I've yet to find a really solid atheistic argument that says at least that you can have an objective law without an objective lawgiver, and that's, of course, your concept of a higher power, right? Whatever that means can be up to interpretation, given the various forms of religion that have come up throughout the world, but a shared objective ethic, that's a transcendent concept in and of itself, right?
Yeah. And atheists are just sort of classic modern-day liberals, in the sense that they really do want to convince you that you're wrong. I mean, I probably would get along with atheists a lot better if I knew that they weren't, that their goal today wasn't to convince me of something,
Right. It's like it's almost the new Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think it's just because a lot of the modern day conceptions of, it's like when someone says, do you believe in God? It's like, well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean a man in the sky with a beard?
Yeah.
Or do you mean what that actually, the word actually means?
It's a big question.
Yeah, because I think people come to that atheistic conclusion because they think, and this is part of kind of almost Nietzsche's critique of the Catholic tradition, the dogma and the sort of the way that it's kind of become conceptualized as some sort of disembodied sky daddy. You know, it's like, well, that's a purely, what would you say, like, materialist interpretation of the concept.
Yes,
you know, you're
actually, yeah.
I don't think you're going to have any actual person of any faith saying, well, no, there's a man in the sky who grants wishes, you know, flying spaghetti monster, whatever. It's just not. But that's what the argument comes down to, as opposed to really trying to unpack what is this concept of this higher, you know, objective lawgiver, this higher embodiment of moral ethic, the logos, right?
And so do you think that atheists have a problem with that God concept that you just described?
I think it's a misinterpretation. I think it's I think it's widely a misinterpretation of it, and I think it's kind of a remnant of a much more simplistic pre-scientific era way of thinking, and the dogmatism that was kind of built around the church necessarily to hold together cultures up until really the scientific revolution in many ways.
Yeah, I don't myself do the man in the sky thing. But I absolutely believe in a source, you know. And but if someone does believe in the man in the sky, I support it because that is what links them to their personal spirituality. That's the gate for them. And that's fine. I support that because I personally believe that spirituality is important. Now, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness that's going to go everywhere and say, hey, you really need to be spiritual. You really, really. But more like atheists do. But I support it. I support anyone's, you know, soul searching and introspection, and it's. So I support that, but then, you know, then within that scope of things, you can have other little debates, you know, with some maybe mega conservatives that I might debate on things about spirituality and religion. They're all healthy. It's good, you know, to have these talks. So
I mean, I would say I've come to more of a Jungian worldview when it comes to spirituality, you know. But I went through my my phase in my youth where I would have swung not only more left leaning politically, but more atheistic in worldview. That wasn't satisfying, you know. It wasn't good enough, you know. That didn't, because it really just leaves a lot of unanswered questions. It's like these traditions, where they arise from. Why do we have this old story, for example, in the Judeo-Christian tradition that's held up for so long, and where does it come from, and how has it been cobbled together from all these myths and traditions to create a body of work that is meant to communicate an objective ethic and a mode of being and a way to act in the world, you know. And you know, when through coming to Carl Jung and understanding some depth psychology and all that, it's like there's a somewhat of a reconciliation of the scientific worldview and the spiritual worldview in that. I think.
I agree.
Which is really heartening, and I can't really pry up the ideas that he had, you know. There's really and go, well, this doesn't seem correct, you know. A lot of it it makes sense, you know. So that's my take on it. And
well, look where Roseanne has brought us.
Right. From Roseanne to objective morality.
Well, to I guess maybe close her topic a little bit. Did you see any of the episodes, by the way?
I haven't yet. I'd like to see them, and I would like to loop it back into what that means on a broader cultural sense.
Yeah.
As far as art and really art and what's
Well,
coming down the pipe. What do you think is coming down the pipe as far as culture goes? And I mean the manifestations of culture, whether it be art, music, literature, film, television. How do you think that? I tend to think that this is really just the watermark or something, the indication of what's going to be a much larger change down the line. Also, we live in New York, so ignore that.
Yeah.
But I think that this is just the starting indicator of a much greater cultural shift that's happening.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing how it just popped up out of nowhere. She just came back, and it's like God has a way. Like I kept saying, I have faith in the future. I have faith. And so this is one of the things that just pops up that sort of is indicative of hope and change. It is just one big bridge, and there are probably more to come. I think a lot of money is coming from conservatives, and they took off Tim Allen's show, which was
that's a great show too. That was a funny show. I did see some of that,
and it was high ratings, and and so I just think that the industry is going to be like, well, you know what, they're giving us the ratings, they're making money for us in that sense,
right?
We're gonna have to give in.
Mm-hmm.
And what's kind of cool about Roseanne is that so I've seen all the episodes so far, and the show is surprisingly funny, like it was back then. You would tend to think you might lose something,
right?
And it's very impressive how she's still got it. She's witty and charming and bitchy and all that stuff, and she's still got it. That's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And she really is that show, in the sense that, and this is just my opinion, it's like some of the kids, I feel like they don't have it,
right?
So much, but she's really got it, and it's just impressive. It's still funny. I was scared. I was like, oh, this is not going to be as funny.
Right.
And I love her. I've always loved her, actually. Because for me, growing up, well, not really growing up, even like just 5 years ago, I remember just having a real hard time in my life. It was like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 7. Hard time in my life. And then just watching some Roseanne episodes and thinking to myself, that's how I gotta do it. Just not give a shit and put one foot in front of the other and keep going on in life.
Mm-hmm.
The show, by the way, is also very... People don't really know this. It's very intelligent. A lot of people don't know that she's actually a writer. She's a writer. She's always been throughout the whole thing. It's not something that just sprang up in one episode. A lot of people don't know that. The show is almost kind of like, I think of it as kind of like, what do you call it, like a soap opera, in the sense that it's much better if you've seen episode 1 and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it makes more sense, because it's a long story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's intelligent in that sense as well. She also really captured, and I'm really talking more about the original episodes at this point, and why this show is actually intelligent, and people don't really get that a lot of the time. She captured so perfectly the essence of what families were going through in the late 80s, when the economy was kind of going down and people were struggling. And that's, why I said, that's why I got to do it like her. She just puts one foot in front of the next and does it and says something bitchy and funny and moves on.
Mm-hmm.
So she captured that whole thing in the 80s, the economy. All throughout the 90s, same thing. She just did it so well. Why else is it intelligent? It's deeper than a lot of people know. It's deeper than a lot of people know, which is interesting. And then so in the last episode, she reveals that most of what you just watched was actually just the story she had been writing. And a lot of it wasn't even real.
Really?
Yeah. That was the last episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, because
right.
you had a question. Sorry.
No. By all means.
To answer your question, like, where do I think it's going from here? Yeah, they're just gonna have to give in to us. I mean, the ratings are massive. She's a Donald Trump supporter in the show and in real life, but she's still so fair to liberals at the same time.
I think so too. I think all the interactions I've seen, she really just treats people the way they treat her. You know,
yeah.
She's like very cordial, very warm, very friendly, very kind of snarky and quippy, but still very never bad natured unless somebody's ill tempered and bad natured towards her. Then
she'll snap.
Yeah, she then turns the other direction pretty quick. But yeah, I think. So
but I don't know for the future. Like, I can't predict, like, well, then this type of TV show is going to pop up, and then there's going to be a pro Donald Trump something on Broadway. I don't know. I don't know exactly.
It might take a little longer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know exactly what's coming next, but I can say, like I always do keep saying, I believe in the future. Like, I think it's going to be a good future. I think by the time we actually experience it really good, we'll probably be pretty old, though.
Mm-hmm.
And then even from there, it's going to get even better from there. I do really feel that. And so it's amazing how, again, a show like this just springs up as sort of evidence of that hope and as a sign of where things are headed. So it's definitely good. But if you have predictions, please share. Like,
I mean, I think what you're saying about the economic incentive is definitely holding true. There's most of these traditional forms of media and stories we've seen dwindling. Numbers I like to go to, like the latest Star Wars film, which was very, very obvious in its, what would you say, political underpinnings. It wasn't exactly subtle to anyone who's paying attention.
Okay.
And also, when we talk about like secularization of culture, very shallow, very empty.
Yeah.
Not, especially when you compare it to the old, 77 Star Wars, which was,
brilliant.
had a lot of heart.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of love went into making those. This is really just for me the most insulting and egregious one because, I grew up with those originals. I mean, I obviously not when they originally came out, but when they re-aired in the 90s, that was huge.
Me too. I was such a fan.
Yeah.
Loved it.
So when I see when I see something like that become really nothing more than a product, which I think is true of much of what has happened through art, it's really kind of a product. I mean, pop music, for example, what's popular now is not lacks a lot of a human element. It's a lot of people who are performers who can sing well and dance well and sell their image.
It's disposable, though.
It's disposable.
Very disposable.
Yeah.
And how could you do that to Star Wars?
No,
you know what I mean?
How can you do that to art in general?
Well,
I think what
my friend David would agree with you big on that. He's because he's an artist and he's just so sad about where things have gone in the art world. He's so sad about it.
It really is sad. I mean, that's I think going to shift, and I think that the political manifestation that we've seen with the shift towards the right and becoming much starting to become the dominant culture, and that's what's going to happen, I think, slowly.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily the right per se, but probably closer to a libertarian ethic, something
Normalcy.
along those lines.
Normalcy. I mean, I never thought of, like, before the Trump era, I never thought of myself as some sort of raging conservative.
Right. Well, I still don't consider myself
Yeah.
conservative or liberal.
Yeah. But you know, it made you realize the insanity that was going on what we now term the left. It just made me realize how much, normalcy and sense that I want to say conservatives had, but or have, but it's bigger than just conservatives. It wasn't even so much about the division of the left and the right with the whole Trump phenomenon. It was more the division between, of the division of, normalcy, normal people, normal mindsets, and these people that don't have it together.
Something more fringe.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean...
And they admit it, too. Because they think that everything is oppressed, that everybody's...
Right.
That there's...
Marxist ethic. Everything's an oppressor-oppressed dichotomy.
Yeah.
And again, there's some truth to that to some degree, but that's not the only thing.
Right, and what they have done by believing so hard in that is kind of stop living.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, yeah, everything is framed in the framework of who is oppressing whom, and there's really... I don't think that... I had a conversation with another close friend of mine, is a master's student of literature, I believe. Very well read in many of the great philosophers, and certainly more of a Marx sympathizer. So we'll get together, have drinks, and kind of banter and debate back and forth, and I always enjoy that.
God bless you.
I enjoy it because it's, they're not... person's not an idiot, they're a master's student, at Columbia. They're certainly
Do
no
Marxists tend to be, I mean, I don't know if you know this, like atheists as well?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because Marx himself, I mean, the Marxists and the Bolsheviks were vehemently anti-religion. Because, again, it's you can't really have both. Marxist is a purely secular ethics system that's materialistic.
Yeah.
So if you have an objective ethic that transcends the material sense of being, then your oppressor-oppressed dichotomy tends to break down. Your necessity to control the means of production, and it doesn't create an ethical, would you say, it's not an ethical necessity. Your ethical necessities are derived from God or Allah or whatever,
Yeah.
So yeah, our Marxism is vehemently anti-religion in its fundamental roots, I would say. It has to be.
Yeah, well, there's another problem I have with it, I mean...
But the conversation... what was it that we had is, I don't even think that most people... And this is kind of veering off from the cultural thing, but I don't think that most people on the left who identify with that sort of ideology even really believe it themselves, because these are people that themselves have friends and relationships, and really once you start to... When you have a relationship with an individual on an individual by individual basis, and you value that person, and they value you, and you have trust, and you have camaraderie, you're not really viewing things between the lens of who's oppressing whom in that relationship. One of you might be rich, one of you might be poor. Doesn't matter. And I have very close friends of my own who are quite well off through inheritance, just simply astronomically well off, and I'm not particularly, but we're very good friends, and we have great conversations. We go out to dinner, we have drinks, we talk about all manner of various topics like we're talking about now.
Yeah.
There's no oppressor or oppressed individual in there. There's no attachment to their wealth as somehow an expression of their actual manifestation of being. I don't consider it. I think myself very thankful when they want to pick up the tab on a dinner bill, and in some nice place. That's great, but I value them as a person, and that doesn't come into play, and I don't, and that's what, And I think that all these people who want to buy this ideology, they don't act it out, you know?
Yeah.
So you don't really believe. If you don't act something out, then it's hard to say you really believe it, you know? That's tough.
Yeah, I was just brought up to be so independent and not really so much in a cynical way, but my mom just always like reminded me, it was like, you know, it's like kind of a little bit like, it's gonna sound cynical, but I don't really mean it in a cynical way, but like you've only got you, like, so get it together, you know. And she just taught me to be independent. She taught me like little things that seem insignificant, but they are. Like, she taught me about lending money. She in her personal philosophy is like, you never lend money. If you're not willing to give it up, then don't give it.
Right.
Because
right. If you're not willing to not get it, potentially
yeah,
not get it
because
back.
you're probably not going to get it back, you know. And she just taught me things like that. So I feel like that's where also some of my healthy relationships came from, like because it's give and take, and and there isn't a need for any kind of borrowing and lending. It's give and take, and you know, just as an example, sometimes we'll go out and I get the bill, and sometimes we'll go out and you get the bill, and it's just
mutual.
Yeah, it's very mutual, and I'm sure it's those little things that she taught me is how I've been able to develop my healthy friendships that I have. So being raised that way, and also constantly being reminded by not just my mother but family members of that I'm an individual, and they would tell me, so like I remember being like 4 or 5 years old, and it's like, well, yeah, you know, because my mom is half Cuban. My mom and her sister, my aunt was telling me one day, well, you know, here you can have anything you want, so you have to, you know, but you have to work for it, and you have to make it happen for yourself. But you're here, and this is the best place that you can do that. And she was also talking about, she was also mentioning Cuba, and she was saying how Cuba, it's communism there, and this is what it is, and you know, you'll work for the week, and then you'll get, you know, literally you'll get maybe this amount of food, and that's all you get, and
it doesn't matter how hard you work.
It doesn't matter how hard you work, and you know, that's how they live there. Some places are actually like that, not here. And I was brought up literally being told these stories, so I was brought up to value the place that I live in our society. So to now see, and we've touched on this topic already before, I'm sort of repeating, but to see our society like fall apart, and when I go on OkCupid and it's just everyone says they're an atheist, it's like, what's happened to our society? Is everyone really an atheist? Like, all of you guys? Seriously? You know, it's what's happened. So that part, you know, occasionally I'll ask that question in my head. It's like, what's going on?
Death of the Logos, I guess, would be, or the loss of the Logos would be, like Jordan Peterson's argument would be, is the loss of the faith of the masculine rational ethic concept that is embodied in, say, the figure of God as it was iterated in the Western tradition. Loss of faith in that, and really a loss of faith as such in masculinity as well. I mean, so it's a complex issue. I think that.
So it's a lack of balance.
I think it's a lack of balance. I think that the eros, the more feminine sensibilities of, as such in culture, have taken kind of hold, which is why we are concerned with things like equity and everyone having a good share of the resources, and nobody being oppressed, and nobody having to face any sort of any sort of discrimination or anything like that, even though we all discriminate against each other all the time because we make judgments that by choosing to spend time with one person and not another, that's discrimination. Those are very traditionally considered, and this is more on a psychological level, more feminine character traits in there.
Yeah.
Those are more embodied in the left, and women do tend to lean more liberal than men, generally speaking. And so... and
it's so funny that a lot of them complain about patriarchy, and yet it's that left side that has stripped away some of their feminine qualities or traits.
Well, because the concept is that women must be equal with men, and in all ways, but that doesn't match nature.
Yeah, you don't want it that way, actually.
No.
You know,
Why would
and
you?
she doesn't want it that way either,
No.
because, you know, that's what, you know, for lack of a better term, it's like that's what, and this is not a sexual reference, but the metaphor of like, you know, the key fitting into the keyhole, it's like because, you know, it works, you know?
It's the uniting of opposites.
Yeah.
And that's a old
Yeah.
concept. I mean, that's
Oh, well, I just brought it up.
Yeah, it's across many cultures because, speaking from then this is a heterosexual perspective, but I think it's a much deeper than that. It does iterate in culture. I have these traits. What do I need somebody else around that has those traits for? I need somebody who's, at least in some ways, my opposite.
Exactly.
To balance that out, and you can take that individual observation, and I think you can expand it out culturally. It's all the way down to left and right, and having a balance between the two, because obviously things swing too far one way, not good. And things swing too far one way, you have communist Russia. Swing too far the other way, you have brutal right wing authoritarianism. It's hard to call fascism that because, like, fascism as we saw it in Germany in the 40s was also socialist, so it's like the worst concepts of both. But
which is something that the left don't like to admit to.
Oh, they're the socialist. Yeah, I mean, it was highly nationalistic, highly socialistic. It's pretty much the worst of all ideas. Don't get me wrong; they fixed their economy quite quickly, but at what cost?
Right.
But I'd say what we're seeing happen too is you've got that secularization, that atheism, that loss of faith in logos or animus, discerning rationality, that is more characterized as masculine generally. But I think that going back into the culture, that's going to be beginning to come back. I think Roseanne's a very early manifestation of that, and people will vote with their dollars at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll see, my prediction, if I were to call it that, would be that you're going to see a sort of new movement that it's coming up to try to combine the best of both worlds. Sort of social liberalism of a sort of live and let live concept, but then a fiscally conservative, or maybe even bringing back of a traditionalism, some traditionalism
and you kind of see that with the show, with Roseanne. So you're what you say is kind of already happening, and there's more of that to come. But what you say is already happening, because that is how Roseanne's show really is. It's what you said. It has a lot of balance. So it's a wonderful, almost sort of a blueprint, which you can totally expand upon. It doesn't have to be, all our families don't have to look like Roseanne's, but
Well, and I think that the people who manifest that in their personal lives are going to be the people who are able to bring together people who are more in the far left and more in the far right, and go, guys, let's unify this.
Yeah.
Let's try to work together here, because you've got some good ideas and some shitty ideas.
Yeah.
And you've got some good ideas and some shitty ideas. And I've got some good ideas and some shitty ideas. But let's find a balance. You know, let's try to toe
Yeah.
the line here, and I mean, I guess that's a moderate viewpoint, but well, it beats the two manifestations we've seen even recently of the really fringe right and the really fringe left, because neither I don't want to have a beer with either of those guys. You know, I'll do it if I can hopefully bring him back from the brink, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing with leftists is that it's actually hard to have a conversation with them. That's the difficult part.
It's ideologues
because
in general,
they
right?
won't they will not give in to, even if something makes sense, like they won't give in to that.
I mean, yeah, I would say it's ideologues in general because they don't tend to speak in ideas. They don't tend to speak anything original or honest. They're just kind of reiterating whatever is dogmatically considered correct within their ideology. That was what I was thinking in that evening when I was having a conversation with that young lady and the older lady who got into it. And I just think of that scene in that line in Good Will Hunting. Well, at least I won't be unoriginal, because it's all I'm hearing. I'm not hearing anything original from you, or like you've really spent time thinking about these things. You're just repeating exactly what your camp would tell you have to repeat, you know. But where are your original thoughts? What do you actually think about these things, about these issues? Because they're obviously much more complex than a simplistic ideological worldview. So I think that's what makes it hard to talk to an ideologue on the right or left, because I've had friends who are also Trump worshippers of a sort. They really, you know, it's all you know, and nothing against these people, but it's all everyone who disagrees with me is a cuck and Trump is daddy and all of that. And
I hate that too, and
it's
I've made a couple of posts about that recently, and there was I wanted you to hear it. We can still pull it up. Trey Gowdy. And he did a great speech about. You probably heard it.
I'm not sure if I've heard it, but I mean, I enjoy Trey Gowdy. Yeah.
He made a great speech at a university. I forget which one it was. Is there one called Liberty University?
There is.
Okay, so I think it's that one, and
I believe it's up here in Massachusetts or something. I think. No.
Well, what he said was that you know, if you're waiting for some messenger, you know, some savior, another, whether you think it's Obama or you know, whoever, Bill Clinton or Lincoln, if you're waiting for, it's like, that's never gonna come, you know. The person you're waiting for is you. You know, and I'm paraphrasing, and he said it way more brilliantly in his speech, but that's what he was reminding everybody. It's that that you hold the power. And one of the things that Roseanne said on Jimmy Kimmel was, she said, you got to remember, it doesn't really matter who you voted for. You're the boss. You tell these people what you want done. And so it's sort of in line with Trey Gowdy's speech, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that. I think more conservatives have forgotten that, actually.
Yeah.
Because they're too busy worshiping Trump. And I adore Trump, but I'm not, you know, an Obama head. You know, all those people that just agreed with everything that Obama did. I'm not a Trump head.
You see that same thing on the left. They go, you know, now it's always hearkening back to the good old days when Obama was president. It's like, well, those good old days weren't all that good either.
Yeah.
And the good old days, they're here now if you make them.
Yeah.
But
and all your power's in here now.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I have no tolerance, or it's very hard for me to have tolerance for that sort of worldview too, because I mean that's equally ideological. It's dangerous, certainly, because you're elevating, at the end of the day, a man with a tremendous amount of power. You're elevating him to almost a god tier level, and it's like, well, that's dangerous. That is
Absolutely.
very dangerous. We've seen in history how dangerous that can be. And it's, you know, not to say that would happen, but you shouldn't think that way.
Well, it's so disempowering to yourself, honestly.
True. Yeah.
And the reason I posted that was sort of certainly as a reminder to people, but also somewhat as a response to people who were just kind of shitting on me because I didn't agree with the attack,
right?
You know, and is he doing something brilliant behind the scenes? I don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
You know, we don't know. I can't say that he is. I would hope so. I hope, you know.
But you have no reason to assume that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so what do we know? Shall we just sort of dive into that now? I know that's one of our topics.
Yeah, we can since it's a good segue into it. So let's go ahead and move into that.
You know, we know that it was done late at night. It was there were no civilian casualties. It was pretty much governmental office buildings that were bombed. It was done at night, so no one was in the building.
Right.
You know, it's limited.
It begs a lot of questions.
Yeah.
To the purpose, though.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, if Russia has every right to respond, but if they don't, that's gonna, and I hope this is the case, that's gonna lead me to think that there's something else going on behind the scenes.
Well, it's either that Russia has blinked and decided they're not willing to aggress against the U.S., which is good for us at least.
Yes.
Or it's that there is another conversation going on,
right, that
nobody's aware of, that is moving things in the geopolitical compass in ways that are hard to really. I mean, then you get into the realm of just theorizing, you know, speculation. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I like to think that Trump is doing something brilliant, but you know, I don't know what it is, and I wish that we didn't have to do all of these, you know, behind the scenes, so not transparent, and all those kinds of things that even if they're good things going on behind the scenes, they're still like, there's just so much hidden.
Yeah.
You know, and just so much the public doesn't know because of the way they play that game, you know, the way that game is in the world in politics, you know. So.
Well, I mean, and it's a very difficult
sad.
line.
That's another thing that I wonder. What will the future look like in terms of our government? You know, even if they're doing the greatest things for us someday. Will it always be this way? Will it always be some story that the public can't really put their finger on and doesn't really know what's going on?
Well, it might be because what we got to realize is that the people who are operating on the level that these individuals, these first world leaders, are operating on with nuclear capabilities behind them.
Yeah.
A misstep could lead to the genocide of the entire human race, potentially. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as much as we don't want to believe that would happen, and I tend to be more optimistic, at least, and I tend to think that if it did happen, we'd crawl out of the ashes, but
yeah,
I'd rather not see, like, everything that's been built over thousands of years be hit on the reset button.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't sound too great.
Not at all.
Yeah,
Not
it would be kind of awful. As much as I love the Fallout games, doesn't sound like, it wouldn't be fun. Fun for a video game. The certain moves that have to be made can't. I mean, the public wouldn't even understand, and they really can't be communicated to the public because it would endanger the moves as such, right? It would actually put those plans in jeopardy that hopefully we, as an act of faith, assume are aimed at the good, at something, at a better tomorrow, you know.
Yeah, to be more clear, I don't want them to tell the American public, oh, we're going into Syria, but it's really this that's going on. I don't expect them to say that. But what I would prefer in terms of transparency is just sort of be straight up. So let's say that this attack is sort of insignificant. It's not like a real attack. It's all...
Mm-hmm. It's kind of kabuki theater.
Yeah, it's kabuki theater. Let's say it's that. I wish that we didn't have to do that. You know, they don't have to. I understand you can't tell me everything that you're doing. Like, I like that President Trump doesn't say everything he's doing to get ISIS, and then, you know, and which this could be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
This attack could be part of that concept. But I wish that they would just, you know, not. I just wish that they could not get involved. That's what I wish. You know, I wish that we didn't have to get involved at all.
Well, I think
I don't care. I know there's
reason...
an oil pipeline issue there as well.
Right.
And I just don't want to get involved. Let them do whatever they're going to do. I don't care, you know?
My greater concern is because you're right even from a basic perspective, there's no matter what we assume, was it Assad who did use the chemical weapons? It doesn't really make sense for it to have been him. From a strategic standpoint, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But
God, let me just, because we've got a few people on here, I just want to tell you guys that if you want to see this on YouTube live instead of your, you know, little telephone, you can go to Joshua Lazarus's YouTube channel, and the video, you can type in "Surprise Hangout with Mike" of Beautiful Scars 2.0.
And you'll see it live on the channel.
And you'll see it live on the channel, yeah, okay? You can see it on a nice big screen as well.
And you can ask questions in the chat.
And you can ask questions, yeah. So give us some good questions.
Yeah.
All right. So going back to...
Right, so I mean, let's grant, even if we grant that, say, it was Assad, we have no business there. My concern is, and I think what does put things in a much more questionable area is the Israeli involvement, the Israel question.
Which is a bit of a touchy subject.
Obviously,
yeah.
And rightly so. But there is some involvement regarding Israel there. They obviously did launch an attack on Syria before this chemical attack.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really, I mean, most likely U.S. intelligence has a pretty good idea of what's actually going on. Most likely. But we don't.
I think so.
And of course, where Israel is involved, the United States will be involved. I mean, you can basically take that.
And this is we'll use this later to segue into a little bit of talk about, you know, the deep state and the Illuminati and who they are, and because unfortunately the bankers, the mega bankers are really involved. They're involved in all the wars, and this is another thing they're involved with, and they want that pipeline. That's one, and when you go throughout history and look at all of the Middle Eastern countries that have been taken over by America, and this is fact, if you go and see what happened was that they would install one of their banks.
Right.
So,
right. So let's.
So it's about monopolizing.
Right. Well, and if you look at the banker involvement in most wars in the 20th century, I mean, there's heavily what would you say, privatized banks. Bankers are involved in some way in funding some aspect of every single war, basically in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also there's talk about, you know, the UK being very much for this attack to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now
you're talking the attack, the response, the American response attack.
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yeah. And you know the Rothschild dynasty, of course, they live in the UK, and you know they're really you know, a lot more heavily involved than people know, because
they own all the biggest banks
exactly
in the world.
So they're going to have all of this influence on the government.
J.P. Morgan, Chase.
Yeah. Well, after the Napoleon War, the War of 1812, the Napoleonic War, they married into the royal family.
Mm-hmm.
They married into it because they profited so heavily from that war that they literally owned England,
Mm-hmm.
basically, and it just seemed like the right thing to do, I guess. And they ended up, marrying into it,
Mm-hmm.
marrying into royalty. So it all connects, and it's not really, on one hand it's common knowledge, but then it's not widely known.
So I would ask, I mean, to go through all of history and the degrees to which, well, for example, the Rothschilds and various banking families have been involved in wars is something that would take hours to unpack.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great sources on the internet for you guys to check that out.
Sure.
Come to your own conclusions. A great movie is All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. Take about an hour to watch, and it kind of breaks down the involvement of bankers in all of these armed conflicts throughout past 200 years or so. But let's set the framework into what's going on with Syria, Israel, and everything, right, and Russia and all of that right now. What do you think is the interplay there?
Well, it's hard to get into in the sense that, not only is there's this, conspiracy thing that's going to go up in people's head about it, that people are very, what do you call it? They're afraid of the conspiracy or the conspiracy theory. They're kind of, they want to throw something in the dumpster once it starts to go that realm, sometimes. But it's not even that. It's really the Israel-Jewish part that literally makes this somewhat difficult to talk about.
Right.
Because it's so very easy to be labeled as an anti-Semite or something like that.
Classic hot button, yeah.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but really,
Just gonna get some more lighting. Go
Oh, yeah.
Continue.
The Rothschilds, now you gotta go back in history again, and when they set up the state of Israel, because the Rothschilds, well, they say they're Jewish. They believe they're Jewish. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's a little better. Just thought it was getting a little dark. Okay. Because we didn't really set up. We had proper or better lighting earlier, so.
Okay, yeah, that's better. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
They set up the state of Israel, and of course. They also, a lot of people don't realize that they funded the Nazis, and they funded, they funded the Nazis. They funded, just like they did with the War of 1812, they funded both sides of the war. And they use sort of political Zionism. They use that. That's kind of their safe zone. So one of the reasons that they even funded the Nazis too and helped them achieve this, even though the Rothschilds themselves are Jewish, or at least claim to be, is to set up this whole anti-Semite thing. And so it was a way for them to get away with everything that they were getting away with. Don't say anything. There's literally a documentary on the Rothschilds with the Rothschilds in it and being interviewed. And they talk about, there's a rumor that they own about half the world's wealth. I mean, that's trillions of dollars. That's just a rumor. Nobody really knows. But they are probably the wealthiest
they've
family.
got at least a net worth of what, 12 trillion or something like that. Last I looked.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
I think it was 200.
Is it
to be honest with you,
geez.
because their banks are all over the world. It's their banks. But they, instead of talking about what a wonderful life they have and how much money they have, they're talking about basically being attacked by anti-Semites, and how life was so hard for their family, their dynasty, before they reached the point that they reached, before they reached the wealth that they, and it's like it's a documentary to sort of like have pity for these people.
And you don't get to say that and still fund the Germans in World War II. You can't really have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that the UK is involved, that Israel's involved, that there's a pipeline involved, and we know their routine of installing their banks. It's every single Middle Eastern country that we've attacked and taken over, that's what we
Wipe
did.
it out, put it in a bank.
Yeah.
Control the currency.
And give them democracy. But it's very important to, control the currency.
Yeah,
That's
control the flow of capital. You control resources.
Yeah.
So
when I say this, it has nothing to do anything negative about Jewish people.
Sure.
Whatsoever.
Oy vey.
So, I have a lot of Jewish friends. I was just out last night with one of them. And I don't know. I have fantastic friends, so I don't know, they're fantastic. That's all I can say about that.
Right.
But that's what you'll get labeled when you talk about it.
Right.
So I have to say, like, I wasn't crazy that Trump was super, super pro-Israel, because I support Jewish people, but I don't. And actually, there are Jewish people that also believe that they go out and protest against the state of Israel, because they also know better, and they feel that they're being, and they're right, that they're being screwed over by the powers that be, the bankers, these. I mean, you can find on YouTube interviews with Jewish people that have a major issue with the Rothschilds, and they feel that they're being raped, that their culture is being raped, and why do some people look at them not good sometimes? It would be because of this family, this dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's a difference between being supportive of Israel as a nation, as a concept, and being supportive of what Israel does.
Right. Exactly.
And their actions.
Exactly.
All of them. I mean, it's a very complex situation as far as the actual active military movements going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they are under threat.
Let's just put it this way: they have their own drain to swamp.
Right.
Drain to swamp.
Drain to swamp.
Swamp to drain. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, America's going to get pulled into that, though, because of alliances and
and we'll see how long that goes.
And the fact that somebody's does have to, because you do kind of need a big brother state to protect that little country.
Yeah.
So it's a very complex situation.
It is, because the Rothschilds set it up for their own benefit, yet these people, they're also benefiting from it, but they're also, they don't realize they're being screwed over as well.
Yeah, well, and there's really no way to disentangle it either. I mean, because these banks are such touchstones of how money moves in the world.
Yeah.
Which is this long net that just keeps everything afloat. It's our trade. You can't just get rid of that, and then, I mean, what do? You break that column down, and then everything else collapses. The entire global economy is gone. I mean, essentially, the global economy is held hostage by a small set of people in some ways.
Right.
And that affects everything, because everything is linked into the U.S. dollar, which is pretty much got primacy worldwide, at least at present.
Mm-hmm.
It fluctuates, but it's pretty much the most powerful spending tool.
Mm-hmm. And
that's routed through the Fed and connected through all these banks majorly in the U.S. J.P. Morgan, Chase, probably the biggest bank worldwide, and that's owned by the Rothschilds, right? So.
Yeah, what eventually ended up happening is that after late 1800s, these other sort of like, they started to develop, the Rothschilds started to develop almost like a little, if you will, metaphorically speaking, like a little army in front of them, so they could be even that much more hidden. Mm-hmm. So they put other bankers as almost the faces that you can focus in, so you don't really focus in on the Rothschilds themselves.
Right.
But sort of put a head out there to sort of do all of this was Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan himself, the two brothers, Max and somebody else, two brothers, Warburg.
Warburgs, yeah.
The Warburgs. J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, the two brothers, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. And for a while, they became the people that you would know about. I mean, I think if you go out in the street, the average person doesn't know who the Rothschild dynasty is. But they have heard of J.P. Morgan. They have heard of,
Obviously, especially in New York,
yeah. Yeah. They have heard of Rockefeller, So that's eventually what they ended up doing. They're great at hiding, they're great at keeping themselves in the background.
Now, what's the relationship of... what would you say the direct relationship is of these proxy individuals and
the Syrian,
the Rothschilds, and then we can begin it. But what is their relationship exactly
to the other bankers?
Yeah.
They're just bankers that they sort of put out in the forefront so that you can focus on them and not so much on.
Well, do they fund those?
Oh, Rockefeller. What do they do?
Yeah.
They run those banks. They run those banks. They fund the wars. So the two Warburg brothers. It's a very convoluted story because it's history. They funded both sides of I believe it was World War One.
Mm-hmm. I believe I've read about this, but it's been some time.
Yeah. So instead of for the War of 1812, the Rothschilds funded both sides of that war. There was two Rothschild brothers, one in France and one in England, and one funded one side and the other funded the other side, and but now they don't have to do it anymore, and that's the point of these other bankers at the forefront.
I see.
So yeah, so that is the point of George Soros, for example, who's I don't know him as a banker, but he's a billionaire.
More of a finance type of guy, right? Investment guy.
Yeah, and yes, and he may not be funding wars, but he is funding,
cultural movements.
Yes, yeah. Cultural movements, and so they do like these people out in the forefront. The more at the forefront you are, the more kind of low level you are. Mm-hmm. Now at this point, you would have to start getting into or believing in this idea of a ruling elite, right, which some would term the Illuminati and things like that. But and that's stuff we can get into. But I don't even think to me it's like, well, I don't really need to be convinced. Why would I have to convince anybody else? It's just there in plain sight when you just look at history. It's just there. Mm-hmm. It's just tends to be overlooked. And when you look at what the Rothschilds did and things like that, it's clear to see. I don't know if they're at the very top of the pyramid in terms of the ruling elite. Are they it? Mm-hmm. Is that it? But we know that they have a lot of influence in our world.
Right. Well, certainly.
Especially financially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it's dangerous, and lot of people don't really see it. You know, it's clear that there is, trying to find a softer term other than ruling elite, but there's people who are trying to make things happen behind the scenes to benefit pretty much just them.
I don't really care what happened, who how many people die.
Yeah.
For that, right?
Yeah. And the Trump movement, I mean, even Rothschild took out an article talking about how, and these are his words, Trump is a disaster for the New World Order. So, and those are his words, again. How you want to think about that New World Order or what exactly it is is your business, but they do oppose him.
Right. It shows an intention.
Yes.
It shows whatever it is that these people are trying to build something that's what they're interested in, and so whether or not you're on board with that is up to you. Well,
right.
Right.
Exactly.
Fair.
Yeah. So you know, I'm sure it's a strange thing to talk about. So I'm treading lightly, but I'm sure as we have more interviews in the future, we can get even deeper into it and talk even more.
Well, do you want to move that into, what do you want to do, one more topic?
Sure.
Mega corporations, political correctness, consumerism.
What was the other one that we talked about as well that we had, so we did Roseanne in Syria.
Amazon Megacorp.
I remember that one, but there was one. Wasn't there something else we threw in there?
Probably.
Let's talk about mega corporations.
So what do we have to say? What do you have to say about mega corporations?
Well, you know, mega corporations is another tool of basically this ruling elite to monopolize and to help bring about, you know, one of their main goals, which is some sort of socialism, some sort of communism, to have better control of the people, you know.
Can you give an example of one such and how that's
being
exercised?
Yeah, like just Amazon, and you know, Trump just, so when he, you know, spoke out against Amazon, I appreciated that. But of course, you know, as you know, sort of original liberals or whatever it is that you want to term them, just even a few years ago, not long ago, when they were doing the Occupy Wall Street, these people were against the mega corporations and the banks. That was like one of the points. Right. They're certainly extreme. They're also funded by George Soros. So the funny thing is that George Soros creates this movement, and, you know, yes, be against the banks, be against the rich man, be against mega corporations that are monopolizing everything and not letting mom and pop open up their businesses. Be against those things, which there is a good idea to that, but they're perverting it, because the reason George Soros wants these people to get into this is because, yes, be against those things because we need to bring about socialism, because everything's going to be so much more fair that way. So yeah, be against these bad guys. Meanwhile, he's that very bad guy, and in reality, they don't want you to get rid of those things. They need those things. That's their bread and butter, these mega corporations and the banks. But if they can create this society of people who are against those things, and then, you know, someday, which is what they've been trying to do with all the presidents that they push in office, you know, the savior will come, you know, like Barack Obama, and slowly work our way into socialism, you know, with the Obama phone and, you know,
and so what
things like that.
To what end do you think that is? Just to have to be the ones who are in control of the distribution of wealth and own all the resources, or do you? I mean, what's the
end goal?
If we're following that train
what's the
of
end
thought,
goal?
Yeah, and how does it, for example, how in what way does Amazon play into that, for example?
They just bought Whole Foods. I don't know if you know that.
I think I did read that.
They are opening up these shops where they don't really need people. You just check out on your own. Mm-hmm. And CVS, for example, the pharmacy is pretty much that way. You check out, which I hate that. But, you know, obviously it's not helping people with jobs. So that's one thing there. But, and of course the elite also, they kind of don't see a need for people. The more computers, the better. That's how they see things, and that's why they, you know, like they want to bring into, you know, society, you know, driverless cars and things like that. And so I'm kind of what do you call it, digressing a bit as well, because I'm just trying to cover every little nook and cranny. But Amazon, so what, also another thing that the elites do is that they push, for example, I'm just giving you an example. Yeah. They push GMOs and things like that, and they're very aware of what they're doing to people when they do this GMO stuff. And so when it comes to GMOs, where you really find them is anything that's popular, McDonald's, CVS, you know, all the chips and stuff like that you see. Anything that's of a brand name is more than likely going to be GMO. They know that they're, you know, poisoning people, and it's not really solely about population control. That's partly a reason, but it's also about kind of changing people genetically. So we may not feel it now, but our kids will turn out a certain way.
Right.
You know, of course, Alex Jones, you know, likes to talk about, which is true, how I guess some of these chemicals, you know, turn people gay. Or if you keep feeding a generation this chemical, you know, something is going to be strange down the line. Sure. Something is going to be strange down the line. Sure. So, you know, as a gay person, I have no desire to only have other gay people in the world.
Yeah, the world still has to be peopled and all that.
Yeah. So, so when Amazon gets involved with Whole Foods,
hello.
What?
Smelly Negro. What's up? If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to chime in or talk on it, speak on anything. Good. Thanks for saying hello.
Okay. So, you know, they're gonna slowly mess with our food. With Whole Foods is not gonna be, you know, what it was. It's gonna change.
Right. So you think that's what's going to happen, is that
that's one of the things.
Corporation like Amazon is buying Whole Foods in order to actually influence what foods are being
that's one of the reasons
are available for purchase in the population, and see how that changes behavioral output somewhere down the line.
But it's but it's also so that's one result of that potential result, but also as mega corporations, you know, there's one right after the other, you're going to kill off the mom and pop shops, and it's what that contributes to is killing off individuality. Mm-hmm. You know,
right?
You can only get this at CVS. You can only get
destroys competition. Yeah, creates monopoly on the market. I mean, even then.
Exactly. And those things, as you destroy individuality, all those little things together, bring about the socialism or the communism that the elite would prefer for controlling us. Now, what's the end game? You know, that's the big question. What's the end game? And nobody really knows. I mean, sometimes it seems that they don't know, because their game has shifted throughout the ages. Their game shifts, you know. But, you know, just as an example, and this is not whatsoever an attack on Christianity, but as an example, the Bible was pieced together by Emperor Constantine. It's just a simple fact. There's so many books that aren't included in the Bible, and a perfect example, probably the most perfect example of that is the Book of Enoch, which is mentioned in the Bible 7 times at minimum, and yet that book never made it in.
Right.
You can read it, but it's not a part of the Bible.
Yeah, it's certainly available. I've looked at it myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So the when he did this, because you could say there was basically there were actually versions, just as there are versions today, of Christianity before Emperor Constantine.
Of course.
He wanted to. He got about 300 plus, sort of Christian, whatever you want to call them, priests or whatever. And they together decided on what the final Bible would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for this, and he made it the law that you had to be Christian, you know, it's to control the masses. So royalty or a ruling elite have always been involved and always been also very insecure. I mean, if you're doing this to people, you're insecure, you know. But they've always been very concerned with controlling people.
Consolidation of power, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
Over across time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if I were to spitball, I'm not even sure there would be an end game so much as to maintain power in the here and now, and ensure that the maintenance of that power and growth of it over time, whatever that means. You know? But there's no real end goal other than the continuation of that.
Right, and this is, you know, I can't put this out there as fact, but this is a big rumor is, well, one thing that is certain, the elite and those in particular involved with Masonry, they have personal spiritual beliefs, which is that they have to tell you what they're doing in order to actually go ahead and execute that without receiving back negative karma. And if they can tell you what they're doing and you have no response to it, that gives them the leeway to do this without... Yeah, it's consent. So they do this. They will tell you in different ways, whether it's a television show or that's their way of doing it, or a commercial or whatever, or even in a speech. You know, there are quite a few presidents who have talked about the New World Order, actually. Reagan, Bush, Kennedy. Talking about it in a good way, in a positive way. Mm-hmm. So that's another way that they'll do that. And I forgot. I've lost my train of thought a little bit. What point was I trying to make initially?
Endgame, Amazon.
Endgame.
Consent is part of the protocol.
Also, so, and they're involved, you know, the ones that are more specific to Masonry, involved in strange rituals and things like that.
Sure.
And so, end goal, that's really what I want to focus on. There's a rumor that, like I said, in television, stuff like that, they tell you what they're going to do. There's a rumor that the book The Hunger Games is that, or the movie The Hunger Games is them telling you how they see the future, what they would like to do to you, and how they would like to. So you can consider that a potential end goal if that's what, you know, you're looking for, like what would they do to us. But it also, like I said, over time it shifts because, you know.
Well, I think that really what feeds into, I mean, then we can go down that rabbit hole and wonder and speculate. Mm-hmm. But even if there are malevolent forces in the world, what's feeding into it is us. Our consent is our consumerism. Our consent is blindly buying into whatever is fed to us.
Yep, and that's why they would love to monopolize as much as they can.
Right. Because then
and that's the problem with the mega
options.
Yes, that's the problem with the mega corporations.
Right, I see. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean my big concern as of late, I mean my greatest concern is probably culture, and I think and linking kind of back to what we talked about before, our consumerist viewpoint, and again this is one of Marx's more accurate critiques of capitalism. Okay. And the way we just kind of blindly spend on anything that'll give us momentary pleasure as opposed to long-term, planning. That's expressed in culture, in the shallowness of our art as of right now, and that's all created with an aim in mind. I mean, most of what is considered high art nowadays, film, television, music,
it's really hot,
is designed by committee. It's designed to draw people in, to put people, and of course you design a film or a piece of art to be heard, to be watched. Of course you want that, but generally, traditionally, it was that value was elevated above the money. But now everything is designed in order to get you to get as many people spending as much money on a product as possible. Nothing has a transcendent value anymore, and consumerism feeds into this because these are these mega corporations that own all. Disney, owns all of the great canons of art of the past 100 years, basically. Now you got. I mean, say for DC Comics is owned by Warner Brothers. Oh, so much better, But they own the Marvel series. They own Star Wars. All the rights to all the great Disney films of the 80s and 90s. That's just feeding the beast, I guess. You know what I mean? Whatever that means. Whatever that beast's aim is, it's certainly not your best interests. And I think that really comes down to the lesson at the end of the day from this is like, believe to what degree there are bad actors with shadowy conspiracies together for world domination or whatever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter. Making people aware of the fact that there are people who own these companies, these mega corporations that create these products to be consumed, be it entertainment, be it in some cases food, literally consumed, McDonald's, all of this, and they don't have your best interest in mind. So you have to figure out what your best interests are and act accordingly, as opposed to be kind of a slave to whim and a slave to what various corporations present to you, or even consuming the news, consuming information. Yep. Where do you get your information? I mean, that's a big issue.
Only 6 mega corporations own all of the news that you watch. There's only 6.
Exactly.
So that's a problem.
that's concerning. Yeah, it's a big concern. Yeah. I mean, you got the Rupert Murdoch Corporation. You've got Time Warner, and that they're all linked in to all of these.
Ted Turner, which I think is that also Time Warner?
I believe
probably,
so.
Yeah.
I believe so. So these are people with their own interests, and they are not your interests, and that's, and to some degree you wouldn't expect them to be.
Yeah.
So be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And don't believe what every corporate news outlet tells you, or what any corporate news outlet tells you, for that matter. I mean, and
you've got to be willing to research yourself. And I'll listen to some regular conventional news for research purposes.
Yeah. Just to see what they're saying.
Exactly, yeah. But, I try to do the alternative media, which I know are not owned by those people. So they're actually smaller. They don't have an agenda with the news.
Or at least much less so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And they still are, they're at least more interested in their viewerships. Well, good interest for the time being, because they have to be by virtue of the fact they are small.
Yeah.
But that's cultural shift for you right there, because I mean,
growing.
What happens is that grows, that shifts, they gain the money, that becomes they become the new tyrant at some point, and then things shift back the other direction again, and that's how this works. That's how culture sustains itself. It has to move back and forth, and we're all kind of along for the ride. So I guess to kind of loose this again back into the beginning, we shouldn't be at each other's throats over it.
Yeah.
Because these changes are natural.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the people are going to end up the winner in the end. Like I talked about, how I see the future positively and how I have hope and optimism. And I mean, that's all it takes. They can't do this stuff if people just say no. And the truth is that they have already started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really evident with the election of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the first time in a very long time that that they did not get to install their preferred president. You know,
presumably, at least.
Right. What are you saying? That this could the whole thing could be a big hoax, or you know?
Who knows?
Who knows? I've thought of that too. I've thought of that too, and I'd be like, well, that would be really awful. But I feel like probably not, only because, you know, you could just smell the genuineness in his speeches.
Yeah.
And when he was campaigning.
I think, like we talked about before, I think there was an outcry from the collective unconscious for that, you know.
Yeah, we manifested that.
Yeah,
basically.
I think so.
And so, you know, as we become more sophisticated, I think we'll be able to get rid of most of the those, you know, people who don't give a shit about us, who have a lot of wealth and power. I don't care that they have wealth and power, you know, but I hope everybody has wealth and power, you know. Donald Trump has wealth and power, and I'm happy for him about it, you know. But these other people don't care about anything but themselves.
Right.
And they're doing a lot of damage to us, you know. If they didn't care about anything but themselves and left us alone, that's their business. I don't care.
Yeah.
That's fine. You don't care. You just care for you. That's fine. I don't care. But they're doing their best to manipulate. You know. I don't know. I remember being younger and, you know, being less sophisticated and finding out about the foods. And how they'll degenerate your health and things like that. And I used to go to special stores just to get normal food, you know, like whether it was some sort of health food store where mostly everything was organic.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted normal food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, GMOs can contribute to anything from something tiny to just having maybe not great skin, or well, I guess this is not so tiny. It can mess with your immune system.
Right.
You know, one thing that really does that, as well as contributes to cancer, and if your body can't handle it, you'll get cancer fast from it, is the fake sugars.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, in terms of your immune system, that will screw it up so bad. Yeah. And it's highly acidic as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you want to be more pH balanced, you know. Highly acidic, that chemical. So
yeah, I mean,
those are some of the things I have to say on that.
That's what we gotta do. Is, I mean, it's really just education.
Yeah.
And it's really just being more aware and really, I mean, every act of purchase into these systems that don't have our best interest in mind is a form of consent. It is us.
Yes.
It is us saying we want more of this. We want more of what is not good for us. When we turn our eyes on to CNN, I mean, that's all that plays in my gym is CNN, and it drives me insane. Not because it's partisan, but because it's nonsense. It's farcical. You know, it's blatantly false. It blatantly has an agenda, and I don't want. And it's very two-dimensional. It's not very deep. It doesn't really go into the complexity of anything. It's just shallow. It's more entertainment than it is news.
Yes, and they're getting really very unclassy on television.
Yeah.
On CNN lately, very, even kind of like borderline saying nasty words, bad words.
Yeah.
And they can get away with it because they mostly can get away with it.
They're owned by Time Warner too.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And if they say a nasty word about Trump. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, well, we fed that beast for many years.
Yeah.
And I think that beast is slowly dying.
It's slowly dying, yeah.
Because I think the movement is towards alternative media, like YouTube, Netflix, all of that. People don't...
Even Roseanne, she says, I watch alternative media.
Yeah.
That's what I watch.
Well, I mean, anyone asks me, like, about television, I'm like, I don't have television at home.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. I just don't watch it. Like, I don't watch television,
mm-hmm.
period. If there's a show I want to watch, I will find a way to get access to it, but I don't need... Why would I... What is on TV? And I think it's part of, like, advertising is a big part of that, you know? People are turned off and tired of... I think advertising is... It's never going to die out entirely, because you need to be made aware of what
mm-hmm.
products are... I mean, you need to keep the economy going, so people need to know what they can buy, and people want to know what things to buy that suit their interests, right? But advertising is changing, too, in a big way. And going... less of it. There's going to be, because we're going to be less saturated. So people don't watch TV anymore because it's mostly commercials about things that don't suit, you're not interested in.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend an hour watching something with 20 minutes of it being somebody trying to sell me something, you know?
Which is almost what it is.
Which is exactly what it is. And that's more consumerism, you know? It's not capitalism, it's consumerism. There's a difference. One is a tool, the other is a value system. One has to do with how you act in the world in relation to the world. Are you a consumer, or are you somebody who discerns and makes choices about those things which you want to be entertained by, or want to
mm-hmm.
own, or want to read?
And when I see those commercials about the medications, and I'm like, why would anybody want to... The commercial turned me away it put me off on it instead of selling it to me. When it's, you're gonna have this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem if you take this, but it's gonna get rid of that other problem you have. Yes. And it's like, really, why would anyone? At least they tell you. But
government's good for one thing.
I guess. Yeah. No, it is. I mean, I believe in limited government, obviously, but sure. I'm definitely not an anarchist.
Well, that's just another form of utopianism.
Yeah.
The state has always existed. It will always exist, and we need to accept that.
Yeah.
As that. Now, what that manifests as, we have some choice in.
Right, and the philosophy, the original philosophy of America, and the Declaration of Independence, scripted by the Founding Fathers. To me, there's no better philosophy than that.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the greatest philosophical works written. I mean, it really is the culmination of a long philosophical tradition.
Yeah.
A very, very long philosophical tradition. Perfect. Well, nothing's perfect.
Right, nothing's perfect, really... but I don't think there's anything more sophisticated than that in terms of what a society is best off looking
as far as the bedrock of a society.
Yeah.
If you're going to build a civilization on something, which is what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing else has presented itself as of yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anything else will, frankly, short of barring some sort of catastrophe that topples empires. I don't think there's going to be a great civilization that arises out of the Middle East by creating a better philosophical doctrine than the Declaration and the Constitution. Yeah. So I just don't see it.
I agree. So
well, I think we wound on. I think we did a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Any last things to throw in there? Any last things you want to touch on or say to any of the audience, past, present, future, that might view this now or later?
So, guys, let us know what you'd like us to talk about. Maybe there was a topic that we touched upon today, and you want to hear more about that. Maybe you have a question about Syria. Or maybe you have a question, maybe you're thinking about Roseanne, I don't know. And you want to know something about that, or what do I think about this that she did, or what do I think about Jimmy, or what does he think about the Jimmy Kimmel Roseanne thing, which was really great. that was funny,
something.
Yeah, the way she just told him.
Yeah, well, he didn't really have anything to say.
Yeah.
It was funny to watch.
Yeah, she basically said, "I'm still the same. You guys went far out. You lost everything.
Crazy and lost everybody."
Yeah. So that was good. Anyway, but I guess that's it for us today, huh?
I think so. Yeah, of course. Yeah, the camera I know has been getting fuzzy and not fuzzy. It's a much higher quality camera that we're working with now, but we're just trying to get the ins and outs of how to make that work properly. So moving forward, it will be a higher quality recording overall, but still got to get the technical details hammered down.
Cool.
To speak to that, yeah, my Twitter is under my name, Instagram, YouTube, any of those places you can reach out to me. If you want to be a part of a live conversation, let me know. Lay out some topics. We can talk about making that happen. You don't have to necessarily be in New York. We can do it remote. The internet's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And same goes for any topics, questions, anything moving forward. We're gonna try to keep doing this with more people as I can kind of speak to them and bring them in. The whole concept is to have these conversations with people who have something worth saying, something to contribute, and normal people. Bring it back down to bring it down to some sense of normalcy and reality and humanity a little bit here. So, yeah, to anyone who hops in the future or hopped in for this, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for coming and hanging out again.
Yeah, we always have deep ones.
Yeah, it's always
deep
fun.
chats. Yeah, it's always fun. And guys, you can find me on Instagram, Beautiful Scars 2.0. Substitute the F in beautiful with the number 7.
As you see it in the video here.
As you see in the video title here. And that's all I'm on for social media. I'm not on anything else.
Get this camera to focus properly. It's got autofocus on. We'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, it's okay. But that's it for me.
But that's it. Yeah, that's it for now then, guys.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep an eye on all those social media places. I'm doing more work right now, especially with hopefully publishing some poetry and maybe some music pretty soon here. So that could be fun. In the meantime, stay classy. I got nothing. I got nothing.
Yeah, do stay classy.
Be well.
Try to be well and try to stay classy.
All right.